Now, I have been on the record of talking about how Colin Kaepernick is being wrongfully blackballed and how he should be on a team, specifically the Rams, maybe even the Jets or Browns, but and even the Jaguars too, because all four teams have pretty bad quarterback situations. Well, one player whom I like a little more, but doesn't play quarterback, he's been wrongfully kept on the street, and frankly, he could help. He could help someone. Tight end Gary Barnage had played for the Cleveland Browns over the past 3 seasons, and over the past two, he's racked up over 1,600 yards in the air. He's had a catching percentage that is over 60%. His catching percentage was better in 2016 than it was in 2015. 67% in 2016, while it was 63% in 2015. A place, Cleveland, that's not known for good quarterbacking. It's kind of strange that a guy like him cannot find any kind of work, whether it be at the tight end void Pittsburgh Steelers, um, extremely tight end void Baltimore Ravens, and weirdly enough, I list another team because since they have no wide receivers, they have terrible blocking from their offensive line, and they could use another blocker in addition with players like Luke Double L Wilson and rookies, second year players like Jermaine Ifedi and a lot of other young offensive linemen. I feel that the Seattle Seahawks would be a good place for Gary. I really do. People, look at Jimmy Graham and they say, oh, he's a tight end already. They don't need any more. They have wide receiver problems. What does it give for Gary Barnage to go to Seattle? Well, number one, they're a contender, and they actually, to me, have the best chance of going to the Super Bowl out of anybody. I see them having the chance of winning 15 games because of their ability to be undefeated at home and the fact that the NFC West is crippling apart. You have a couple of bad quarterbacks, it's particularly one in their division, Goff. You have a slightly improved team, but expected to struggle, the 49ers. And when you have 4 games kind of in your bag, if not 3 out of 4 wins right off the bat right there, and maybe another 2 extra with an aging Arizona team, your Super Bowl chances are pretty good. But when your blocking is far worse than your Super Bowl chances, if you're the Seattle Seahawks, bringing in Gary and then moving Jimmy Graham to an outside receiver's position, if not a slot receiver position where you don't have anybody outside, that would be a good idea. That would be in the Seahawks' best interest and thus improve their chances of going to the Super Bowl. Sure, people talk about all this soap opera stuff where Richard Sherman talks crap to Russell Wilson and second guesses him, and they act as if like Richard is this cancer, but it seems like they only dig up dirt when they want to, like the reporter that is, and the reporter that I bring up is Seth Wickersham of ESPN. Frankly, nobody had heard about Seth for years right now, and then when he has something that hasn't really caused him to be 0-16. I mean, they've only won the NFC West for God knows how many years. Well, when you have like idiots like him and other people getting their panties in a bunch about Richard Sherman losing it, and the only reason they give a fuck about Richard Sherman or dig up dirt on Richard Sherman is because he's got dreads and he is a loudmouth, he looks like a hip hop guy. It shows me that they don't care about the real problem on the team, and that's blocking. Barnage can block, and frankly, he is a much better tight end than Colin Kaepernick is at quarterback. In 2016, Pro Football Focus had rated Gary Barnage as the 25th best tight end out of 63 that were eligible. As for Kaepernick, he was rated as a player that couldn't start. The way that the scoring system works is that their are scales that range from 90 to 100, 85 to 89.9, 80 to 84.9, and 70 to 79.9. In layman's terms, 90 to 100 is elite, 85 to 89.9 is very good, 80 to 84.9 is good, just good, and then 70 to 79.9 is average. And in the past, Pro Football Focus has talked about how the average grade is like a low-end starter player, but it's pretty much implying that such a player could be replaced. Well, in the case of Gary, yeah, he's an average player, but he's a complement to a guy like Jimmy Graham. He is somebody who could go alongside Luke Double L Wilson, Willson, hence the nickname Double L Wilson. And it might be a terrible one. I'm sure that plenty of Seattle people would want to throw chocolate shakes or triple chai lattes down on my face and all, but it's home of Starbucks, so I had a terrible coffee joke there. But in the case of Seattle fans, I'm sure that they don't like the nickname Luke Double L Wilson, but when Tom Cable's reputation has outlived itself. He's not this guru at offensive line like Dante Scarnecchia of the Patriots, or back in the day Joe Bugle was with the Washington Redskins. I personally think that it's time that they get another blocker and do something pragmatic with Graham. Graham and Baldwin would be two outside players, and having maybe one blocker or two to go alongside, if not another in the backfield to complement the running back, whether it be Thomas Rawls, CJ Procise, or Eddie Lacy. I think that they could be a physical team, protect Russell Wilson, and maybe even have him be in an advantageous situation where a guy like Barnidge could get open down the field and get them a first down or two. The 67% catching rate it pretty much proves that he can still be dependable. Sure, he's in his early 30s, and yeah, like the last form of interest that he may have got was reportedly with Jacksonville and Buffalo, but sometimes you have to pick up the phone on a player who is left on the street for too long. Sometimes you can't worry about age. If the guy's got hands, if the guy can work in the blocking game, if the guy can do something for your team when your team really has a need, you should just pick him up. The Seattle Seahawks have signed aging vets like Antoine Winfield and Kevin Williams in the past, but Winfield, from my understanding, had retired. He just missed the Super Bowl. But with Kevin Williams being on the team in 2014, the runner-up year, and Chris Clemens had come back. He had been in Jacksonville, and he had just come back, and then he eventually retired. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. It's a low-risk move, and frankly, you would get more out of Graham by not having him as a blocker. He's a terrible blocker. He's an enlarged wide receiver and a pretty fast player too. He just trimmed his weight down to 260 so that he could last in the league longer. If the 260 weight works for his 6'7" frame, and his speed and size can outmatch corners, especially like slot guys like Tyrann Mathieu, especially inside the division, I think that a guy like Barnidge would be excellent. Sure, there are people crying foul about Colin Kaepernick, understandably so. I think that it's wrong that he's being kept out of the league. But for Barnidge to be out longer than Cap, it kind of shows me that a lot of teams are just too afraid to take a risk. They're too unwilling to make room for a player who's different. But at the same time, a lot of teams don't realize the advantage of a tight end: high catching percentage, blocking ability, enough yardage to go down the field. I mean, this guy is a better tight end at his stage of his career than Jason Witten. If Witten can be a below 10 yards per catch type of tight end and be wrongfully kept in Dallas in so long when somebody else like New England or Pittsburgh would have released him early because of their philosophy, get rid of a player a year or two early rather than a year or too late. It doesn't make sense for Barnidge to be on the street and pretty much have him join camp.